welcome to another episode of Stuck in My Mind podcast. I'm your host, WIZE, and I'm very excited. My next guest is an author, a coach, and the founder of the Family Enrichment Academy. Welcome to the show, Jim White.
Well, hello, welcome. Glad to be here. Excited for the conversation.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. The pleasure's all mine. First of all, you have 6 kids and 13 grandchildren. Am I correct?
That is correct. The current count is 13.
Listen, I come from a family of 6 siblings, and my mom has probably 18, 19 grandchildren. So I know about a big family. So that is amazing. So you're a coach and an author. What inspired you to well, I see what inspired you. You have a huge family. But what made you want to coach and try to and show people that your family is what fulfills you and everything?
Yeah, it's kind of like how I got to this point in my life. So, as you mentioned, I've got 6 children. So obviously, family's always been a big part of my life. And I would say with that, I've always had an interest in personal development and parenting, those topics as well. And actually, some 20 years ago now, I started doing more writing on the subject. It was just kind of time to reflect and to sort of put ideas together, but it really was it was centered around my family and my efforts within my family. And actually, I might share, I use this analogy in my coaching. It's called the Hero's Two Journeys. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, it's a storytelling structure, but I share it with the people I coach with. And the premise is that in any great story, the hero is on 2 different journeys. And one of them is known as the journey of accomplishment. There are goals and tasks that they're trying to accomplish. And while overcoming obstacles along the way can make for an entertaining story, it's the second journey that really makes the hero compelling. And that's the journey of fulfillment. It's the idea that as that hero is pursuing those outside goals and tasks, they're also discovering new principles, values, and beliefs. They're having an internal transformation that just makes their life work better. And the reason I bring that up is because when I look at my life journey as a parent, it to me is a hero's 2 journeys. It follows that structure. In other words, we had a lot of goals and tasks and things that we had to do. But then I was also going through this internal transformation the whole time. And it was about learning the principles, values, and beliefs that just made our family work better. And again, I encourage parents to, when they look at their role, they're the hero within their family. And while they have things they need to do, I always encourage them to be very intentional and make a first priority that journey of fulfillment, which is the internal journey that they're on. And how I got here, my children, my youngest is now a senior in college. And so they're grown and gone. And I'm at the sort of I would say the tail end of my career. And I just felt called to start to share some of this insight and wisdom gained over the last 40 years as a parent. And so that's why I've embarked upon this journey and formed the Family Enrichment Academy. It's just a chance to share some of that wisdom. And for me, it's my forever project. I'll do this for the rest of my life. It's a calling and it's very purposeful work. If I can help a family to just take 2 steps forward, it's worth it to me to do that. And so that's how I got here. It's just it's a stage in my life that I'm at, and it's something I'll be doing from here on out.
So you mentioned the Family Enrichment Academy. Can you tell us a little something about that?
Yeah, so I have a coaching practice, so I do one-on-one coaching. I've published a book around parenting teenagers. It's just the vehicle that I'm using to share and disseminate information and coaching. I have a course also. It's a parenting fundamentals course. So it's just the structure. The Family Enrichment Academy is sort of that vehicle to share the information that I have with parents.
So I'm sure that a lot of the stuff that you use in your teachings and your coachings really stem from real life experiences, right? From what you've experienced with your own kids.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, and obviously we've had a lot of things happen over the years, but it's interesting as you look at it, and then again, this is where that Heroes 2 journey comes into play. All of those times where, like, let's say we were faced with a difficult circumstance and we were able to get through it really effectively. It always coincided with new insights or new um, sort of growth along that journey of fulfillment. In other words, we were moving forward there, and really part of the message I share with parents, it centers around the idea that within all of us we have this two competing mindsets, and one of those mindsets is fear based, and the other one is love based. And the whole process is about being very intentional about choosing love over fear. And it's in the moment stuff, so when something, sometimes we get sucked into, let's say, anger or frustration, which is more of a fearful mindset. Your child does something and it sort of pulls you into that negative or fearful mindset. And when we react or engage out of that fearful mindset, it tends to not move things forward. It damages relationships, and it's, in a way, it's disempowering to the child as well. And so part of the work I do is helping parents to recognize, where am I, and then being intentional about choosing to be more love-based, so then they can engage from that perspective. It tends to build relationships, and it's more empowering to the child, to empower that child to be their absolute best, to make better choices, to be more responsible, all of those kinds of attributes, which is really what the parent wants for the child anyway.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Excuse me. So can you tell us the importance about a clear and respectful communication within a family unit?
So you're talking about respectful communication? Is it?
Yes.
Yeah. It's, obviously, if we're love based, you're going to have compassion and forgiveness, and you're going to communicate in a way. It's interesting. Sometimes when it's disrespectful, or somebody will say it's disrespectful, it becomes a lot of times when parents say that, it's more of the idea of trying to control what's going on. And part of my message to parents would be that as your child grows, we need to turn over more and more control to them. And then on the flip side of that, what we want to do is empower them to make better choices. So let's say your child's speaking disrespectfully to you. Really, rather than trying to make them stop doing that and trying to control it, and that's, again, what a lot of times, and that's more fear based, and they use fear to try to manipulate that child's behavior. I would encourage them to think in terms of, okay, how can I empower the child to make better choices, and how do I empower the child to be more love based? If that child is more love based, they're going to speak, more kindly, if you will. They're going to have more kindness and more forgiveness and more compassion in the way that they engage with other members within the family as well. So it's about the parent being love based, but then as part of that process, having that child be more love based as well. And we have to teach that and model it. The parent can model that approach as well, which is really very helpful. So it's empowering them to make a better choice around the way they speak, or being respectful.
So what role does personal development play in your approach to your family enrichment? Because I know you're very into that. Is that something you've passed on to your kids? Are they really into personal development as well?
It's interesting. It's a growth mindset. And, when you have that growth mindset, and I have always had that, again, your children tend to model what you model for them. And so if my children do have a growth mindset, they tend to say, okay, how can we grow and learn and develop? And they're open to that. And that's just an important, and I think it's not so much that I told them to do that, it's just they're sort of following my lead. And I would say my wife is very much that way as well. We've always been, interested in personal development and had that growth mindset. And so a lot of it comes from just that example. And, if parents, that's one of the first steps in your parenting journey, is really to open up to that growth mindset. And another reason why I love the idea of a hero's two journey is because it implies that it's a journey. You never really get there. I mean, I'm certainly not a perfect parent, and I never will be a perfect parent, but I can work to be a little bit better each and every day. I can work to be more love-based each and every day. And actually, I like to describe that as like a continuum. If you think about, from a 0 to 100%, what percent of the time do I engage from a loving perspective versus a fearful perspective? And if right now I'm 60-40, 60% love-based, 40% fear-based, well, tomorrow the goal is to be 61-39. I mean, I just got to try to move forward each and every day. And if parents open up to that then, that's a huge step to allowing them to really transform their families and transform their children as well, because then they start modeling that and setting that example.
Do you see, because you have 13 grandkids, do you see your interaction with your grandkids completely different from when you were raising your kids?
It's yes and no. So I'll give you the yes part, where it is a little different because I'm not the parent, right?
Yes.
And so there are certain things that I have to stand back from and allow my child to be the parent and take care of. And so that's certainly, and it could be, if they're, trying to teach a skill or whatever, it's something, it's really the parent's role to be in that. But on the flip side, where it is the same, like one of the fundamentals I talk to parents about is the idea of building connection with your children and being very intentional about that. And with my grandchildren, I'm very intentional about building connection with them. And whether it's conversation, but it's also like I have like 9 strategies in my book for building connection. And one of them is being playful. And so with my grandchildren, I engage and play with them, and it's a way to build connection. I mean, one of the things, I do this thing where, especially when they're little, I can't do it when they get bigger, but I do upside down hugs. So, if they're little 2 or 3 year old, I can pick them up, kind of flip them over. And, it's a playful thing to do with them. And it's kind of, it's a little bit of roughhousing in a way, but that's building connection. And I did that with my children as well. And so that's always there because I want to have that relationship with them. But like I say, there's some things that are really, it's there for the parent should be the one, handling those situations.
Awesome. That's great. So you mentioned your book. How many books have you written?
So technically 2, although only one is in publication right now.
Okay.
I mentioned a long time ago, I started writing.
Yes.
And I put together a book 20 years ago that's now currently not in publication. I'm thinking about bringing it back and getting it reestablished. But that was the first book. And then recently I wrote the book. It's called How to Be the Parent Your Teenager Needs You to Be. And it's available on Amazon. And it's really designed and really focuses on 3 fundamentals. And I'll just share them real quick that are in the book. The first fundamental is around the parent's mindset. It's what we've been talking about being love-based, and it's strategies and techniques to help the parent be more intentional about choosing love over fear. So that's the first fundamental. The second fundamental I just mentioned, which was the idea of building connection, and how can you be very intentional about building connection. And with teenagers, that's really important because that's a time in the life of the child where they start to pull away a little bit. And it's a natural thing for them to start to see themselves as independent and pull away from the parent. But so the parents got to lean into that some, and they got to, they need to be more intentional about, okay, how do I build that connection? And then the third fundamental is around empowerment. It's how do I let go of my need to control everything and shift to more of an empowerment approach and empowering the child to be their absolute best. And so it's centered around what does that look like? What are the skills there? And what's the difference in the mindset when I approach it from an empowerment standpoint? So those are the three key sort of fundamentals in the book.
So okay, so I'm sorry. Well, so what do you think is one of the most significant obstacles for families today, and how can they overcome them?
So if we start with teenagers, um, obviously the one that always pops up is social media and screen time. That's become a huge issue or concern for most parents. And I actually have a workshop on social media and teenagers. And interestingly, what's related to that is there's also in recent years been an increase in anxiety within our youth. Especially those teenagers, that the amount of anxiety that they're experiencing has been, they've done a lot of research. It's much greater than, say, 10 or 15 years ago. And actually, those two items are connected. There's been a lot of correlation between social media and then this rise in anxiety. And so that's probably one of the biggest obstacles. And actually, part of what I share with parents in the workshop, for example, is that social media in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. It's irresponsible use of social media that becomes the issue. And I use the analogy, it's like a car. I mean, when a 16-year-old child gets that driver's license and they have access to a car, the car in itself is not a bad thing. In fact, it can be an awesome advantage for the family when they have another driver. Somebody else can pick the little brother up at swim practice or whatever it might be, or run to the grocery store. But that same car, if used irresponsibly, can become very dangerous at the same time. And social media is very much the same. And so that's a mindset shift. It's okay, how can we help that teen be responsible and be mindful and thoughtful about their social media? And again, it goes back to control. A lot of times parents will want to jump in and just control it and sort of make the teen follow certain rules around social media, which when they're really young, you can get away with that. But part of the issue is by the time they get to be 15, 16, 17, they start to really resist those rules. And by the time they're 18, 19, 20, and they're out of the house, they're on their own, you really lose that control. And so my argument is start in trying to teach them to regulate it and manage it themselves so that they have the ability to deal with it. And it does, when they're 23 years old, then they can handle it. And they're not then in deep trouble around social media, for example. And so it's about, again, taking that empowerment approach. And so like an example of how that looks different is you engage in a little conversation. And let's say you're talking about what's appropriate or inappropriate to post on social media. And rather than the parent just monitoring and policing what the child's doing, you have a conversation about it. And you say to the child, what do you think's inappropriate to post? Here, scroll through your scroll, pull up a post and tell me that you think's inappropriate. And then tell me why do you think it's inappropriate? What about it is inappropriate? You start having those conversations, which builds relationship. And then it allows the parent to have some influence in that as well. And then the parent can say, well, here's what I think. I think this one's inappropriate because of, and so it's a different mindset is what you're doing. You're there to try to build and teach them to be thoughtful, which, and being thoughtful can be very helpful for a lot of different things, and being able to make good choices that can help them in a lot of areas, but really around social media as well. So it's, back to your original question, I think one of the biggest challenges right now is it's around that social media. And, again, what I would encourage parents to do is think in terms of how do I empower my child to make a better choice rather than just trying to control everything that they're doing.
And no, it's you're everybody's attached to their phones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whenever I went out to to breakfast with my family, and everybody had their phone out. I just felt like saying, "All right, everybody, give me your phone, put it in the hat, and let's just have breakfast." And but
Right.
it's at that time, and kids are starting now. The parents are putting tablets in front of these kids when they're 1, 2, 3 years old.
Right. And so
And
there's
they're
that screen time
yeah,
becomes part of it. When the younger kids, it's not social media, it's just screen
screen
time.
time. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think parents should be mindful of that because, kids should get up and run and jump and play and, be physical as well. That's important. And again, that screen time is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just as if it becomes irresponsibly used, because like I have grandchildren now that are 4 or 5 years old, and they will get on an iPad, but they've I've got what is she, 4.5 year old granddaughter now who's really good at math already, and it's because she loves watching these math channels or whatever they are, and she can add and almost subtract, all this stuff. It's pretty amazing. But you got to do it with, and when they're that young, the parent is the one that has to be intentional about, okay, let's draw some lines here. But as they grow, it's important to engage that child in the process of what's responsible use and what's the alternative or what else can you do. And in fact, with the parents with teenagers, I encourage them to design a social media plan together. It's, like you mentioned, dinner times or meal times. What's our agreement here? Should we have our phones at dinner time? And a lot of times the agreement is with the family, no, let's not use our phones at dinner time. And so you do that together so that the child has a chance to be a part of that process. I think is important because then there's some buy-in on their side.
yeah. No, I agree with you on that. I definitely agree with you on that one. What else? Hold on. So, what are some of the most difficult issues you dealt as a parent?
For us and during our parenting journey,
Yeah.
probably one of the biggest challenges we had, one of our daughters, during high school started, sometimes, they'll get a little bit involved with drinking and what have you in high school. Then she went off to college and it became a bigger problem. And so it was dealing with the drugs and alcohol kind of a scenario, especially through those college years. It was something that we had to kind of deal with and work our way through. And it's interesting, when you look back, sometimes you think, well, maybe I should have handled it differently. And I'll just go ahead and share this particular story. It was this particular daughter was a really good student. And consequently, when she went to college, she had an academic scholarship. And so her full tuition was being paid as a result of this academic scholarship. And she got started freshman year, and we started noticing, okay, there's signs that maybe she's having a little too much fun, if you will, once she was at college. Some of the stuff was starting to happen, but she was still getting good enough grades to maintain the academic scholarship. And that's partly because she was a good student, right? So she was able to kind of do both. And it's interesting when I look back, if she had not had that scholarship, we might have said, you know what, you're coming home for a little bit to try to get things back in order. But because she had the scholarship, we sort of hung on there maybe longer than we should have, because if she left, she would have lost it. But so that was one of those challenges that we have, and it's hard sometimes. And I would throw to parents, I mean, it's okay to not know the answer, because when you go through these scenarios, I always tell parents too, there's a first time for everything. That was the first time we'd ever been through a situation like that. And if your oldest child is 16, you only have they're going to be 16 years old, and that's the first time you've ever had a 16-year-old. But then when they turn 17, that's the first time you've ever had one of those too. So it's constantly new stuff that's coming along. And so that's again why it's a journey. And I'm part of what I like to share with parents is, just try to stay love-based as much as possible. Let that guide you. When you're there, let that guide your decision and your thoughts. And the beautiful thing is that if you make a mistake, you can always go back and repair it. And you can always repair that relationship, or there's always a way to move things forward, especially when you're love based. And then that particular daughter, she graduated college, but her degree was not what she wanted. She ended up continuing on her own dime at that point and getting a nursing degree. And she's now married with 3 of the grandkids, and her life is going, well and great right now. So, she made it through that period, but it was a challenge at the time, and it challenged us for, okay, what's the right thing for us to do? What's the, how do we deal with this? And it's just part of the journey. It's part of the process.
Yeah, and it is. It's with anyone's story. Um, even with me, uh, like I said, I didn't know any. I don't have a background in media. I didn't do any of that. And when I started my podcast, it was more of me being able to just express myself. I had been furloughed from work, and
Yeah.
it started off with just me talking and everything. But then when I, I what I wanted was to do more, and so I really took a chance, and I just and started inviting people to come on and started talking to them and
Right.
having these conversations and just wanting to learn more and just get a lot of things that were going off my chest. Like
Right.
it was my form of therapy. It was me really being able to come on and talk with people and then share my story and then have people come on and share their story. And it was it was different.
Yeah.
And so it kind of gave me purpose, because
Yeah.
now I've started doing my show, and I started getting guests on, and I started having some great feedback, and people tell me, hey, keep doing what you're doing. And it was just like, all right, now I'm finding that purpose and that
Right.
drive to really want to continue and continue to have some great conversations and want to speak to people and hear stories like yourself. Like it's amazing the people I've been able to connect with throughout the 3.5 years of podcasting. It's been amazing to see people from all walks of life, and at the core of it, we all go through struggles. We all have our journeys that we're going through,
Yep.
but at the core of it, a lot of us are similar.
Yep. And it's a matter of being able to share that experience or that wisdom. And that's what I said at the beginning. That's why I'm here. Maybe there's something that I can share with people that helps them take that one step, that next step forward. And, it's the particular story, or it's the way I phrase something, or the words that I use that clicks with people. All of us, it's interesting. It's not that I'm saying stuff that's necessarily never been said before or never thought of before. It's just I have my particular voice, and my
Mhm.
particular background, and I share it, and it clicks with somebody. It may not click with everybody, but it may connect with, 1 or 2 people, let's say, that are listening, and then it allows them to move forward. And that's why you do it, and then we can learn from each other. I mean, we all have stuff. I read all the time. You may be a reader as well, but I'm always looking for that next thing, and it's what else can I learn? And I heard you'll like this. I think it was Tony Robbins or somebody. I heard him say, the reason we want to read a book is because that author may have spent 20 years of learning and growing and developing to write that book. And so in a month, if you read the book, you just got 20 years worth of experience, in effect, because he condensed it, that 20 years, into that book. And so
Yeah.
that's the value of reading. And that's part of what, I'm trying to do. I've got 40 years of experience. And, part of my goal is to be the one that takes a stand for being love based. That's really my message. And to put that out there as an alternative or another way of approaching the parenting process, and to encourage people to look at that and to maybe experiment and try it and see how it works for them. Because I've found that it's just, It's very powerful, and it's a source of hope. It allows you to always have hope that things can be better tomorrow than they are today.
So you have the book. You've written the book that you wrote two. You've written two. One is published. You give us some of the core examples from that book. Are there other, you have other books coming out? Do you have other books inside of you?
Yeah, I think I do. I think there's more coming, and it'll be extensions of the sort of extensions of the same. For example, the current book that's published is directed at teenagers, and so a
Mhm.
lot of the examples and stories are related to the teenage years. And I envision a second book that would be more directed at, I'll call it school age, that 6-year old to 12-year old age group as well. And just honing in on some more stories and examples that would be related to that age. Like, for example, in the teenage book, one of the stories I share is about me teaching one of my daughters to drive, which is something, a lot of parents do with their teenagers, is they're in charge of teaching them to drive. So that, I can see that, but I also envision a book around, I mentioned the hero's two journeys, and that's really more of a overall personal development book, that really focuses in on how do we make that journey of fulfillment a priority and be very intentional about growth, and what does that really look like, and how do you do that? What are some of the tactics and strategies? It's about, it's interesting. I mentioned that fearful and love-based mindset. And what happens is a lot of us tend to, the fearful mindset becomes the default. That's where we tend to go more naturally. And part of the growth is being able to make that love based mindset the default. That's where I more naturally go. But it's just like, developing a new exercise routine. You got to get in there and do it and
Yeah,
practice on a regular basis. So you develop that muscle, if you will, in that muscle memory. Where something happens, my initial instinct is to have compassion and forgiveness as opposed to anger and frustration. So that's the distinction there. And so that's I envision a book eventually coming around that, just the hero's two journeys, being that personal journey of growth and development.
yeah, because it's definitely two phases from that 6 to 12 years old range
Yeah.
to teenagers, and um, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. 6 kids is a lot of work. I know because my mom had her hands full with 6 of us,
Yeah.
and I could imagine the craziness. And it was funny because we're we're 5 boys and 1 girl. So my sister had her hands full.
Yeah. Well, see, we have 4 girls and 2 boys, so a little bit more distribution there. But and actually, one of my children has 6 of her own right now. And I know this happened in my family. I know it happens in hers, and it probably happens in yours. When you have that many, the kids tend to take on a little bit more responsibility. They become a little bit more self-sufficient, really out of necessity. I mean, when it was time to make lunch for school, my kids had to kind of take that on, and that was part of the expectation, was that they could start to manage that by the time they were second, third grade or whatever, because it was just too much for us to do it for everybody, as the parents. And so I think that happens. So in some ways, that's a benefit, because those kids in bigger families become a little bit more self-reliant, because they have to in some ways, where when you're the only child, sometimes everything gets done for you.
Yeah,
um, and you don't have that benefit necessarily, unless the parent's very mindful about that, and encourages the child to be more self-reliant.
yeah, yeah. That's how definitely it is in my household with when growing up with my siblings. But so hold on, I have some questions. So how do you envision the role of of personal development in the ever-changing landscape of family dynamics? Do you think more families are gonna start gearing towards personal development within each other, like the entire group, or does it takes the parents show, like you said, yeah, parents showing that, hey, this is what needs to be
You know,
done, or
yeah, I a lot of times I share with parents that the parenting process is really a personal development program for you. It's it's a place for you to practice your skills and to grow and develop as a person. In both being able to manage their mindset and being effective in managing their mindset. And think about this: in building connection and developing relationships, and then empowering. That's all stuff that you do with your children. But if I go off into the workforce and now I'm in a meeting with a group of people, my ability to manage my mindset and to be a voice of reason, for example, and to be positive rather than negative in that meeting, and my ability to build connection with coworkers becomes important. My ability then, if I have people that are on my team and being able to coach and support them to be their apps, it's all the same skill set. It's just that the family becomes a place you can practice those skills as well. And to be honest, one of my things that, when we think about what we really want long term, I put it in three things: peace, joy, and purpose. That's really what we all want. And the peace comes from being love based, and that provides a lot of peace. And joy comes from building those connections and having those relationships and being able to share things with each other. And then the purpose comes from serving others, and we serve them. I mean, I can go and go out and cut the grass, and I get a sense of satisfaction from seeing that job done. But to be able to support one of my children or a coworker and have them grow and develop, and be able to empower them to be their best, there's nothing more purposeful than that, because it's being in the service of other people. And that's really where that sense of and that's part of what you're experiencing with your show. It's you're doing this in service of other people, and it makes it feel purposeful then to you. And that's really where that comes from. And our role as a parent, we have built in people to work that with, which is our children, and being able to engage with them and really empower them to be their absolute best. And there's nothing better than watching your child start to flourish and to start to find success and to be the one that makes the difference. I mean, I use this example sometimes, the classic: the new kid moves into the school, and on the first day of school, they're in the lunchroom sitting all by themselves over in the corner, the new kid, right? Well, I want my child to be the one that recognizes that and goes over there and engages and invites that child into the community, because they can make a difference in that. That's serving that other child. And to me, to be able to encourage and empower my children to be that, to be able to make a difference in that way, that's very purposeful for me. And that has more meaning and impact than necessarily getting a good grade on a spelling test, because it's about them being a good person, and being love-based and being caring and concerned for others. So yeah, it's about that parenting process. It's having that growth mindset, but it's really an opportunity to grow. It's a chance to practice those skills.
absolutely. Jim, this has been great. I've had a wonderful time hearing you talk about parenting, and um, but now is the time where you get the solo screen. You get to plug away where they can find a book, where they can get coaching from you, everything.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. So again, the website is familyenrichmentacademy.com. And actually I have two resources there that are free resources for parents. The first one is, it's kind of directed at the parents with teenagers. It's 10 questions you should never ask your teenager. They're like conversation killers, because one of the biggest concerns that parents with teenagers have is, my teen won't talk to me. And so the premise is you need to ask better questions. And so I have that resource. It's a free resource. It's right there on the homepage. You can download that. And then I also have 10 parenting tips. It's like my top 10 parenting tips that you can download for free as well. So again, the website's familyenrichmentacademy.com. And there's a tab also for coaching and the products. And so you can go there and see, either set up a time to explore one-on-one coaching, or the parenting fundamentals course is listed there as well. And I also have a link to the book, and the book's on Amazon. And again, the book's entitled How to Be the Parent Your Teenager Needs You to Be. And again, it's available on Amazon, but that link is on the website also. So love to be able to, I always say it's an honor and a privilege to be able to serve people as they move along that parenting journey. And just would love to have the chance, if anybody is looking for some help, maybe we can help you out.
All the links are going to be in the description. Actually, the resource, the free resource, I got the link. It's in the description now. I will be putting the website and everything else in the description. So definitely go check it out if you want to get the free resources. If you want some free coaching, definitely go to the website, and then and get opportunity to get coached from Coach White, because he has 40 years experience, 6 kids, 13 grand. That's a lot of experience. Believe me, I know my mom had. She worked with kids is hard. Raising one child is hard, so I can imagine raising 6, and that's no easy task, man. Salute to you and your wife.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor being here. I just really enjoyed it as well. And thank you for the work that you're doing and just the information that you're sharing. And, it all makes a difference. That's what we're here for.
Listen, if anyone can benefit from what we're doing right now, if anyone who tunes in later on, catch the replay, and they're struggling with their teen or struggling with their kids, if they can, if you can help them, this is why I do it, is to make these connections, is to put these resources out there so people can use them in case they need them, because especially now, like it is hard for parents now, especially with everything that's going on and getting shut down for the pandemic and all this other stuff. Like,
Yeah.
right now is really difficult for parents, especially with their kids missing all that time from school, being away from their friends, being locked up. It's making it was a difficult time for
Yeah,
parents.
absolutely.
And so if anything that we talked about, or anything you talked about, and if it's there for someone to take advantage of it and reach out to you, this is why I continue to do my podcast and to share this content with people.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you, but don't leave just yet. Let me close out the show, and we'll chat a little bit off the air, but it was wonderful having you on as a guest.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Shout out to everybody who tuned in. Big shout out to my Real Wise fan, Poppy J, Brandy J. Shout out to the boss lady. Appreciate you and love you. And as always, big shout out to all the essential workers out there. God bless you. Be safe. You know how your boy Wise does it. Peace out.